In this tutorial, I will show you how to selectively adjust your pictures. In the previous tutorial, the changes we made apply to the entire photograph, but that's a thing you would rarely need to do. It's more interesting very often to selectively adjust your pictures, and you can do so by adding masks to your photograph. This is where you would find the mask tool, this particular icon. So if I click on it, it says here add new mask, select subject, select sky. These are artificial intelligent masks. I'll demonstrate them in a second. Underneath you'll find the basic masks you can come up with. So let me show you how this works. The first one here, brush. If I click on it, I created this particular window opened, and now I can start painting on this photograph. As you can see, the brush here has got two circles. The one in the middle is the part that will be adjusted, and then it gradually somehow disappears the adjustments. They call this the feather. If I change the size of the feather, I can do so right here. The second circle becomes smaller. So let me show you what it exactly does. If I click on it, now you see this red circle that gradually disappears. This red circle is some kind of an overlay. This is the mask you created. You can also see it in this box right here, what your mask exactly is like. Everything that is white is somehow selected, as you might call it. So all the adjustments I'm going to make apply to what is shown in red here. There are other ways you can decide upon the color, but there are other ways to show the overlay. I'll show you in a second. So this is the brush I created. And if I'm going to adjust the exposure, as you can see, only that part becomes brighter, and it happens gradually. If, however, I'm going to paint with a feather that is really small or no feather at all, so if I click on it, then the transition from being adjusted to not adjusted is very abrupt. So if I click on show overlay again, as you can see, this here has a defined edge, this particular brush, whereas this one here has got a gradual kind of edge. And that's what you do by changing the feather. As said, you can decide upon the overlay. So let me do this again by painting on her. I'll add a feather to this. So I auto masked this. I'm sorry, I'll do this again. This is something I still need to explain to you. So I'll paint over this section, and instead of showing a red overlay, I can also go for image on black. Then it looks like this, the overlay, or color overlay on black and white. That's the one we are already familiar with, I'm sorry. Or in this case, everything you've painted on, the overlay, sort of speaking, is in color, whereas the rest of the picture is in black and white. So it all depends on your image, what would work most clearly. So you can change the overlay, in other words. Okay, let me reset things and I'll show you some other ways of masking your photograph. Let me first of all make this picture as a whole darker, and then I'm gonna go to the mask tool and I'm gonna select the second one, the linear gradient tool. If I click on it, I can create a mask like this. As you can see, the part that is red is the mask or the selected part. You can also see it in the box right here. So if I'm going to make this part brighter, only that part is becoming brighter. I don't, however, want to make the entire part brighter. So what I can do is, if I'm going to hit show overlay again, I'm going to subtract a certain part of this mask by clicking subtract, and I'll go for another linear gradient tool. If I then, and I'm going to put this away for the time being, if I create a second mask, now I am subtracting this part from that previous mask I created, because I want to make it look as if the light is falling through these pillars like this. And if I'm now gonna adjust the exposure, as you can see, it looks as if the light is shining through these pillars. I can still, by the way, adjust these the position, for instance, of these linear gradient tools I created. Or I select this one, I can put it to the left, I can make the gradient part smaller or larger. If I click on this part, I can turn it around, etc., etc. So you still have many possibilities afterwards by simply clicking on these linear gradient tools. So that's what you get with the linear gradient tool next to the brush I already demonstrated. I'll show you another one. Oops, I'm sorry for that. I accidentally hit the book section in the workspace. I'll create a new mask by clicking on the plus sign, and there's a radial gradient tool as well, and this simply allows you to draw a circle. And you can have them in different shapes, of course, so that's why it's slightly different from the brush tool, but it behaves in more or less the same way as the brush, but it simply creates a circular shape. You can adjust the size, you can adjust the feather by clicking on this particular part. So no feather at all, and a very large feather, as you can see. I can adjust the shape, and I can turn it around as well. So that's the radial gradient tool. Okay, now let me turn to this picture then to show you the artificial intelligence part of the masks. As a whole, this was hard to come up with a proper exposure, and I went for an exposure somehow in the middle. So my children aren't properly exposed, but I went for a particular exposure like that to have some detail in my children and some detail in the sky. And I knew afterwards I would have to adjust things in Lightroom to come up with a properly exposed photo, or a better looking photograph, that is. Now I'm going to make the entire photograph a bit brighter so that now my kids are properly exposed, but as you can see, it has an effect on the sky. In the old days, it would take some time to adjust the sky, but thanks to artificial intelligence, this has become a lot easier. So if you once more click on the mask tool and you hit select sky, it takes some time, and as you can see, the sky is selected. If I now bring the exposure down, you can see that I can only adjust the sky in this photograph. So I'll bring it down, the exposure, I'll add some contrast, I'll bring down the highlights, and there it is. So this is quite convenient, obviously. Now, if I have a more detailed look on what mask was automatically created, I do see that there are some mistakes in it, and that's what you're going to get quite often. So it's a really great tool, these select sky and select subject, which I will demonstrate in a second to you as well. They're really great tools, but they're not perfect yet. I suppose in future it will get better and better, but still I think it does a really great job, but it's not always perfect, so you will need to check. And as you can see, Lightroom also selected parts of my kids, and as you can see, the seagull on his shirt was also selected accidentally. So I could subtract from this mask by painting on them, but there's another way of getting rid of the parts that shouldn't be in this mask, and that's by selecting the subject. So I'm gonna subtract from this mask, this sky that was automatically selected, I'm gonna subtract the subjects. So Lightroom is going to try and identify the subjects in this photograph, and it's going to subtract that from the mask. So if I click select subject, let's have a look. And as you can see, now my children are subtracted from that mask, and I come up with a much better mask than the one initially created by Lightroom. Okay, and then a final picture I will show you. So here I will show you the mask to select subject, but let me first do some basic adjustments. I'm going to turn that into a black and white photograph. I'm going to select, for instance, black and white number 2, which is quite contrasty, as you can see. I'll increase the amount a bit. I'm going to adjust the crop as well. Make sure that there's some symmetry. I'm going to put it a tiny bit higher because I want to demonstrate something. And then I'm going to select the subject. Okay, it does a really good job. Now, if I'm gonna bring down the exposure, it's gonna adjust him, of course. That's not what I want to do, so I want to adjust the background in this case. So what do I need to do for that? I'm gonna invert this mask. So if I click invert, now the background is selected. I'm gonna make this background dark, like this. And then I'm gonna subtract from this mask using this radial gradient tool, like this. Then I can still decide upon the feather, how large it is, etc. So this is just another illustration of what you can do with the masks. I could spend 2 hours on explaining them in a lot more detail, but these are some basic adjustments you can make using these masks. So have a go at this particular photograph in the modules on Canvas.